I didn't realize the well demanded blood. The sun hung high, a blistering eye on a desolate patch of land known only as the Endway. The sheriff hadn't spoken in days. He was tracking something older than guilt. Shadows whispered through the dirt alleys, telling stories no one dared remember. Dust swept across the parched earth, cracked and dry, mirroring the desperation that surged through the veins of the village. The well, once dry, now brimmed with mystery and hunger, a gaping mouth that someone had awakened. A congregation of villagers circled the well, hope flickering like the dying flame of a candle. They stood there, watching the waters swell, a sign they took as grace from the heavens above. The ground beneath them pulsated, alive with secrets none could comprehend. With every passing hour, the wind cut like judgment, slicing through the desolation. "Maybe it's a miracle," Elder Agnes said, her words laced with both reverence and fear. Her hands trembled, cradling the last remnants of a lamb, the sacrifice in the dusk that held so much weight. "It's never a gift without a toll," muttered Father Matthias, his gaze fixed upon the well. "God doesn't give without asking for payment." The villagers nodded theirs. Was a land cursed with shadows, where bargains had long ago been struck under the sunken eyes of the lost. As they chanted prayers long forgotten, the well responded, its waters rising in a dark surge, twinkling with dark promises. Children's laughter, once snuffed out by grave silence, returned barely, but enough to tease the hearts of weary mothers. Yet the peace felt fragile, as though spun from threadbare dreams. But there are things you cannot ignore, no matter how deep you bury your head. The well had tasted blood once, and it would not soon forget. As whispers turned into shouts, and relief morphed into dread, dark clouds gathered in the horizon, a storm brewing over the valley of the damned. The village turned blind to the signs. They were too deep in the grind of existence, too swept up in their refreshing sips and stolen joys. "Do you hear it?" the sheriff asked Agnes one night, a tremor in his voice as he peered towards the well. "It's thirsty." "Maybe it's just hungry," she replied. "And hunger can be fed with offerings." They brought what they could spare first. Livestock went missing. A few sheep, a couple of goats. The folks nodded solemnly. They were sacrifices, after all. There were murmurs of relief that washed over prayerful faces as life bubbled back into their land. But that relief was a grease fire waiting for a spark. Agony curled in the corners of their minds, twisted and dark. Days passed, and the well's heart grew larger, its appetite more demanding. It was no longer enough to toss scraps at the edge. It called for flesh, whispered promises that beckoned them closer. Childless women recounted stories they'd heard of those who disappeared, swallowed whole by the quiet tendrils of night. "Enough!" shouted one man when night fell heavy on their decisions. "How many more lives will satisfy this beast?" "Perhaps it won't see it that way," Agnes replied. "Perhaps we'll just become part of the offering." And so, shadows grew longer as the villagers began to give more than what their hearts could bear. Those who wandered too close, those worn thin by the weight of their existence, or went under the moon's watchful eye. Whispers in the dark turned to muted sobs, as desperation turned to anger, then to silence. "Why did we think it would stay satisfied?" one villager cried, when the first grown men began to vanish. "It's not simply hungry patching our lives doesn't feed the monster." Days turned into nights punctuated by fear. The water still flowed, but it came with an unholy thirst now, churning and raging like a storm confined within stone. The villagers, grim-faced and hollow-eyed, would gather, fearful of what awaited them in their dreams. They saw their kin kneeling in blood under the moonlight, shadows flickering before their eyes like ghosts seeking refuge. "Listen," the sheriff said, pressing the back of his hand to the cold stone rim of the well. "He's looking for something deeper, something that tempers the thirst. Perhaps it's time to look deeper into ourselves," Agnes warned, her voice trembling. "What lies beneath our skins?" The night when the last cry echoed across the valley, they realized the depth of their folly too late. Their savings, their lives, had fed the well for too long. "Seek the lost," whispered Father Matthias, eyes dark with understanding. "Feed the hungry heart that brought us salvation." But salvation morphed into dread when the shadow of the well began to grow larger, swallowing the land piece by piece. The villagers had become unwitting accomplices to a dark legend woven into the fabric of the earth, sunken beneath the weight of what they had surrendered for the briefest shine in the dark. Every offering to the well invited another transaction, a deeper bargain, until those who spoke out against it faded into the darkness. The weight of silence in the village bore like an anchor, heavy and dragging. The air turned stale. The sun dimmed. Through the veil of misery and remorse, resentment seeped through cracks in the stone foundation of the church. The church a prison, a sanctuary, a status that shattered truths. It had spun its web around the villagers, entangling them in a deception they could never escape. One fateful night, when the moon bled silver, Agnes felt a tremor beneath her feet. It wasn't just the ground that shivered. It was the very bones of the earth that howled and cried out. The well burbled hungrily, pleading for attention, and as the cries reached a peak, the earth heaved as though it were ready to split. They gathered again, trembling hands clutching at prayer beads, each clinging to the last hope that somehow God would intervene. Each prayer seemed to echo hollow back at them. "Do we dare venture?" the sheriff whispered. "What if it is the well's grace that leads us into the abyss?" In the depths of that hollow night, they found courage. They descended into the lone crypt beneath the old church, the breath of the village echoing through its darkened halls as a sickly scent lingered in the stale air. Each step took them closer to the secrets awaiting them. The light of the lantern flickered, illuminating stone walls frescoes of their ancestors, carved deep into the sandstone, faces begging for release. Yet, among the carvings, there was something more. Dark etchings twisted along the walls, something primal that reeked of old, buried truth. Who knew the hollow this well held? Agnes gasped, piecing together fragments of scattered text that spoke of horrors beyond understanding. "It's not a source of life, it's a mouth." A whisper came from deep within, a voice calling out from the shadows, cold and resonant. "It hungers. You have awakened it, a being that cannot be appeased. It is not God's blessing you taste, but his wrath." Panic surged through their hearts, flickering like the flicker of the lantern against the moving shadows. "But why?" one villager cried, voice breaking, laden with despair. "What sin led us here?" A pause lingered thick in the air before Agnes answered quietly, "For every innocent life saved, we fed its hunger, and in doing so, we condemned ourselves to the same fate." The darkness entwined tighter around them. The sheriff felt something shift within the air, a weight of dread that took root in the very marrow of his bones. "I can't, the cries won't stop," he whispered, trembling as he turned towards the remnants of a lost family etched into the stone. And as the last of their hopes faded, an old manuscript rustled in the pale light. a prayer, but not for salvation. This can end, Agnes urged, but we must be willing to ignite the truth. The candlelight sparked fire in their hearts. Fear became purpose as they found reassurance in despair. They would bury the truth, might it take a life. Yet the truth carried weight near the well's mouth, an unholy hunger that twisted their own flesh. They could either satiate it or witness its dark awakening. Beaks of shadows flitted against surfaces, calling for blood. And when Agnes cried out to the villagers, "We must feed it what it wants," their fates shifted. It would take the innocent and the guilty alike. Yet hope whispered through the remnants of desperation. In unison, they chanted against the wall, their voices rising into the void they had once feared. They renounced their ties and dared to offer themselves. As cracks latched onto each wall, pressure built as screams rang out against the echoes, rippling through centuries of buried truths. The well, their tormentor, exhaled its blackened depths, stirred awake, aflame with wrath and bloodthirst. The villagers cried out, rich with terror, "Not like this!" But the darkness answered, a groan that shook the very earth and mouth of what lay beyond. "You've carved out your fates," it whispered back, a chorus of souls long forgotten wrapped within its voice. And now the offerings bloom. Shoulders weighed and bodies hunched, they turned to the crypt's darkness and understood the cycle could break, but only through the primal act of relinquishing the life inside them. Yet the past had its own price. Children looked up at their guardians, not understanding the pact being forged. With the flickering lantern casting shadows of what was lost, a collective silence fell over the villagers. They looked back at the well, wrought with unease, the balance tipping finally toward awakening. But then came a final chance. It was Agnes who took that step forward, grasping the dusty pages of the manuscript with trembling hands. "We will never bow to this," she shouted, voice breaking free from the weight of sacrifice that had loomed above them for far too long. What did it matter if a sacrifice was born from loss, or if a life was drawn from the void? The shadows would remain, but she asked for help, a release for all they'd hidden. Then, a booming crack broke through the deep silence, twisting the shadows into forms darker than they understood. Faces formed in the darkness, not creatures, but the past those they had sacrificed without mercy or thought. And in that fleeting moment of discord, the true horror emerged, the reflection of blood in the well. "A name!" the sheriff cried, remembering the wording from a passage long buried on that once kindled fear and hope alike. "We must name it!" The ground trembled as they huddled together, hearts racing. Names rang out like thunder, echoes. Patrick, Grace, Hannah, Thomas. The echoes were their lost. They spoke one name, the name none had dared utter. They made their pact, unwilling to surrender another life. Laughter echoed through the shadows as the shadows receded. The villagers gathered strength, their resolve amplifying the very air around them. Then came the exhale, a billowing tempest from the well, echoed through their core, ripping apart the threads binding them to silence. "I am hunger." The essences spoke through hundreds of voices echoing through the crypt. "And you cannot escape me." But Agnes screamed, "You won't have us. You won't take the light." As flames from the lantern flickered, shadows danced around. The past, now a swirling mist, began to pull against the well's dark depths. "Face yourself," the sheriff bellowed, his voice melding strength with defiance. With resolve, the villagers echoed the final battle cry, a surge of voices still clinging to hope. the ties that bound them unraveling into a scream more potent than the depths of the well could ever muster. A heartbeat thrummed against a crack of earth and stone. Birth and death fused in a clash unlike anything before. The shadows recoil. Their roots became unmoored, darkened threads flying against the void. "What have you done?" came the chorus of wails, the souls threatening to consume, losing form and weight, each pulse fading as shadows surrendered to the light. "Release us!" the village cried, and as they turned their backs on the horror, darkness surged, but hope swept toward them, leaving bloodied truths in its wake. "And so it ends," the voices murmured before they melted into the air, a promise echoing, fading, whispering through the gnarled trees above. But Agnes took that truth and guided them through. She held her sister's hand, and together they forged a path toward escape, breathing spoken promises anew. As the dust settled, the last remnants of that terrible night cast quiet shadows over the smoldering village. The weight of sacrifice hung thick in the air, but the villagers walked free, no longer shackled by the past. Light bled into every corner, breaking the darkness at last. The sun rose again over Endway, painting the land crimson daylight, revealing the bones of a past deeply entwined with choices made in desperation, choices that echoed for far too long. And in the heart of that village, the breaths of those lost would linger and blossom like the weakest flower in the deepest shadows, casting colors upon stones long forgotten. "Remember," Agnes said softly, holding her sister close, "there are whispers in the wind, and within those, the power to choose. So I came to be stories, faded into the bones of memory, allowing echoes of light to rise anew. For they understood that blood called to blood, but even in darkness, hope could always find a way to grow through thorns." When the last echoes of darkness faded, and the name was forgotten mixed, within the shadows of memory there lingered a whispered promise, a reminder of what they had once defeated. As the wind swept across the landscape, silent reminder of that haunted well a new path began. The villagers all found solid ground beneath their feet, and as one last unanswered question simmered, what was justice, if not the price of reclaiming their light? If this story left dust in your throat and shadows on your heart, remember that every choice holds weight. Join us as we unveil more tales, steeped in the remnants of history carved from toil and fate. Subscribe to Medieval Stories, where every echo tells a story waiting to be heard. In the aftermath, life resumed an uncertain rhythm in the village of Endway. The well had been sealed, but the memories of its hunger lingered like a distant storm threatening to return. The villagers, although free from the shadow it cast, could not easily forget the dark pact they had formed in desperation. What was once a humble settlement now bore scars both seen and unseen. The sheriff took to patrolling the outskirts, where the horizon stretched as far as the eye could see, the limits of their existence reaching beyond what they knew. Each shift in the wind stirred memories of the hollow cries that had echoed off the walls of the crypt, memories of lives lost to a hunger that knew no bounds. The taste of fear lingered, a bitter reminder that darkness can take many forms, and it was often born not from the heart of evil, but from the very fabric of humanity's choices. Agnes, with her sister by her side, devoted herself to rebuilding the village. She organized gatherings, each one a chance for the people to confront their past and offer a testament to their resilience. Together, they forged new traditions, that stood in stark contrast to the darkness that had once enveloped their lives. They honored the spirits of those they had lost, lighting candles that flickered against the twilight, offering hopes and dreams into the night sky, a wish upon each flame. I never realized how fragile our lives can be, Agnes would say, her voice thick with recollection. We took for granted the weight of our choices. Her sister nodded, the innocence she had clung to fading with time, yet still possessing a light that seemed to pierce through the gloom. But we also have strength, she replied, her eyes shining with newfound resolve. We survived, together. Together, they clung to each other and to the village around them. Seasons shifted like sand in the desert winds, marking time through laughter and prayer and the occasional somber remembrance. The land, slowly healing, began to bloom once more, twisting wildflowers breaking free through the cracks in the ground, their colors vibrant against the muted canvas of the past. Yet, whispers still rustled among the villagers, tendrils of superstition clinging like smoke. There were stories of the well-tales that warned about its terrible hunger being only a slumbering beast, its roots still nestled deep beneath the earth. One evening, as the sun settled below the hills, blanketing the village with a shroud of dusk, Agnes gathered the villagers once more. They stood around a fire that crackled and popped, shadows dancing on the walls of their humble homes. Fear is a heavy burden, she began, the flames catching her eyes. But hope is a light we can always find. Some nodded, their faces marked with the heaviness of past choices, while others looked on skeptically. They were haunted by uncertainty, yet drawn to her passion. I ask of you, she continued, that we unite our voices, shedding the weight of that which we have lost. Let us transform our fear into strength. We owe that to those we lost. The sheriff stood beyond the firelight, his heart tethered between the past and an uncertain future. He heard her words strike the chords of something deep within him. Hope was a currency they could trade, but how to nurture it without the price of blood? It began with small acts of worship ceremonies to honor the well, devoid of the darkness it held. They composed hymns that celebrated the sun above, the promise of rain, and life that sprung from the earth. Flowers flourished where once shadows lay unfurled. But as the nights grew longer, questions lingered. What if the well were merely dormant? What if its demands for blood had only been postponed? The sheriff carried these thoughts like a weight in his chest, seeking solace in the quiet of the night, searching the horizon for signs of returning darkness. One fateful night, after the gathering had dispersed, the sheriff wandered the hills overlooking the village, seeking answers. The moon cast pale light over the land, revealing shadows that danced upon familiarity. Walking along the old trails, he felt an unsettling tremor beneath his feet, a reminder that he could not outrun the past. The quiet of the night shattered with a deep rumble that rolled over the hills, heavy with the promise of rain. Then came a voice disembodied, yet rooted in the very soil he walked upon. You cannot silence me, it echoed, hauntingly familiar. He sprinted back toward the village, heart racing, adrenaline surging through his veins. They needed to be warned. Fear hung thick in the air as the earth shuddered beneath the weight of revelation. Gather! We must gather! He shouted, his voice cracking through the night. Lights flickered on as villagers emerged from their homes, confusion etched across their faces. What is it? Agnes asked, concern painted in the depths of her eyes. They're coming, he cried. We've stirred something. The well has not forgotten the weight of its hunger calls to us. The villagers exchanged glances, shadows tightening around them like a noose. Some began to whisper, dread congealing in their throats, while others clung to the tenuous threads of hope they had clung to. "But we sealed it," shouted a young farmer, ignited with fear. "It cannot take us. We have defied its demands." "Defiance may not be enough, brother," the sheriff replied, gaze hardening. "We've ignored the truth for too long. What lies beneath can never truly be buried." As the rain began to fall, small droplets that turned into a downpour, air around them thickened, saturated with the smell of damp earth. The villagers huddled closer, fear hand in hand with unyielding determination. "We must reclaim our power," Agnes declared, her voice rising above the patter of rain. "We are not defined by what we've lost. We are defined by what we create." Her words sparked a flicker, igniting a flame of courage deep within the hearts of the villagers. Together, they would face whatever darkness might come, this time fortified, not just by desperation, but by a bond stronger than blood. As they worked to gather supplies, a testament to the hardness they had learned from losing, the sheriff remained vigilant, staring into the distance. The storm rumbled, but the village of Endway stood resolute against inclement weather and imminent threats alike. Through the veil of rain, he thought he saw a shadow twist upon the edge of the lighter, glimpse of something beyond the realm of understanding. Whatever remnants of the well remained had not yet been silenced beneath their pacts of blood, but the spirit within knew they were prepared to confront the unknown. Hope mingled with anxiety, weaving through the hearts of those who had stood before darkness and emerged with scars but unbroken. Yet the tremors of the earth spoke unyielding truth, a reminder that the past extends its hand, always ready to reclaim what it lost. The villagers gathered close around the fires that night, strengthened by knowing they were not alone. They closed their eyes, listening to the rhythm of the rain against the earth, their heartbeat, a testament to resilience in a world where shadows can so easily reclaim what once thrived in the light. With each pulse, they felt the weight of history. Within them, the essence of life mingled with the echoes of the past. Together, they would write a new chapter, a legacy built from blood, hope, and a determination to embrace what echoes within. They would rise. They would stand together against the night. And as the echoes of their dream reverberated, the sheriff understood he had not come to bury the past, but to understand it, to forge a future worth living. For even in darkness, beneath layers of pain, dreams could still bloom like wildflowers, defiant against the weight of despair. Subscribe to Medieval Stories. Join us as we face darkness together, uncover forgotten tales, and embrace shadows as part of the light that guides our way forward. The rain continued, a relentless curtain that fell over the village of Endway. The sheriff stood at the edge of the gathering, feeling the pulse of anxiety thrumming beneath the surface. Tension crackled in the air, an unwelcome guest that accompanied the relentless storm. The villagers huddled close, voices merging into a low murmur, a collective heartbeat of apprehension and resolve. "Gather supplies," Agnes urged, her eyes scanning the faces around her. "We'll need lanterns, rope, and anything that can help us confront this darkness." The villagers moved with a sense of purpose, eyes reflecting the flicker of hope and fear in equal measure. They were a band not just of survivors, but of warriors ready to rewrite the story that the well had dictated for too long. With each piece of equipment gathered, the weight of their collective actions pressed inwards, forging a bond stronger than any fear. As they worked, the sheriff felt the ground tremble beneath him. It was not the well that called to him, but something deeper in ancient energy that pulsed in rhythm with their resolve. Sweat dripped down his brow, the rain mixing with the salt of uncertainty. Echoes from the village's past reverberated in his mind, interspersed with the fresh memories of lost lives, a dual symphony that he could neither forget nor escape. The crack of thunder overhead pulled him from his thoughts. He raised his gaze to the sky, where clouds twisted and roiled like dark banners waving over a battlefield. The storm was not just a backdrop, it was a herald of change, a reckoning that awaited them. The weight of legacy pressed heavily on them all, but it was only through confrontation he knew that they could reclaim the light they had lost. "Let us move then," the sheriff finally said, summoning a power within himself. "We take a stand for those we've lost and for those still with us." The villagers rallied, their spirits lifted by the presence of purpose. They formed a line, heading towards the well, their past, their present, and their future converging at the mouth of darkness. Each step resonated in unison, a declaration against the fate that the well had imposed upon them. As they gathered in a circle, the rain started to slacken, a soft mist rising from the ground, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, a promise of something new. The well loomed ahead, an unyielding specter of shadows and secrets waiting to be confronted. It whispered to them, but this time they were prepared. "Sheriff, how do we confront something that has taken so much from us?" Agnes questioned, her voice steady. "What if the hunger cloaks itself in our fears?" The sheriff stepped closer, glancing back at the villagers drawn to her strength. "Then we confront that fear with truth," he replied. "We name it, we acknowledge it. We do not hide in shadows anymore." With a nod, the villagers gathered around the well, lanterns flickering faintly in their grips. A feeling of unity blossomed among them. In that moment of convergence, they became something greater than individuals. They embodied the spirit of those they lost and the dreams they would protect. "Who do we honor?" the sheriff asked, raising his voice to be heard over the soft patter of rain. With hands clasped together, they lifted their heads, voicing names long forgotten and unacknowledged. "Thomas, Grace, only we know the worth of their lives. We give voice to those silenced." Each voice poured out like an offering into the depths of the void. With every name that met the air, the wind shifted, and the waters of the well began to ripple with a newfound urgency, echoing the emotions of the villagers. It seemed to respond to their declarations, a possession of sorts rekindled by their solidarity. Eyes widened as the well stirred. The villagers stood their ground, hearts drumming in time with the tremors that echoed below. Shadows twisted and danced against one another, holding secrets and pain of it, longing to be set free. Then a voice emerged from the depths, not one of malice, but one shaped by hunger over centuries. "You who fed the cycle, what do you seek?" It resonated through the villagers, vibrating within their chests. "We seek liberation," Agnes cried, her voice unwavering against the chaos. "We seek to reclaim our futures and honor the lives that were stolen." A silence fell, and for a fleeting moment, the air hung heavy with anticipation. The waters swirled, revealing glimpses of faces, long-lost fragments of the past, cascading like fleeting memories intertwined within the depths of the well. As they twisted and turned, the sorrow of those lost became a palpable presence, charging the air with emotion. "You offer yourselves now, when the blood has been spilled. Did you not wish to quiet the darkness?" The voice echoed, deep and resonant. "We recognize the darkness, the sheriff shouted back, stepping forward with conviction. "We are the architects of our own fate, no longer subjugated by fear. We will rise against it." The waters churned violently, and the villagers cried out, holding one another close. A storm had awakened. It conjured memories of fear and despair, twisted through the embers of the pain that lingered like shadows, refusing to yield. "Embrace the darkness. It is part of you," the voice howled. But the villagers clung to each other tightly, drawing strength from the bond they had forged. "We embrace it to honor, but we will not feed it," Agnes shouted, raising a lantern high. "Tonight, we reclaim the light." And as if responding to her rallying cry, the well surged, waters heaving upward like a monstrous wave, mocking and threatening. The very earth shuddered as the villagers drew deeper within themselves, igniting in ecstasy and fury, defying the ever-thirsty maw. With every heartbeat and every cry, they summoned courage to confront what resided in the shadows. As they linked their hands, the fire in their hearts ignited anew. "We choose to let go," they shouted in unison, defiant and emboldened. The tempest raged. The storm howled defiantly, as an unseen force surged within the depths of the well, crashing against the walls of their resolve. Shadows slipped and slithered away, the weight of regret no longer holding sway over the spirits of the living. Suddenly, the earth erupted. The villagers staggered back, bracing against the force. Then the waters parted, revealing something ancient and terrible rising from the darkened depths, its form shifting between reality and memory. A being that twined the hopes and sorrows they had cast into the well loomed above a reflecting silhouette of their past. "You denounce my true essence," it boomed, but the spirit of the villagers swirled together, pooling raw defiance like fire itself. They had come to transcend mere survival. They had come for redemption. They had transformed despair into a force to be reckoned with. The shadows reared back, drawing upon their hunger, yearning to reclaim dominion over the village's heart. "We no longer bow," the sheriff roared. "You may take only what we willingly surrender." In that moment, shadows twisted and howled, taunted by the fearless hearts standing before them. The villagers fueled each other with strength, each name they had spoken before serving as a beacon illuminating the darkness. The well roared, a cacophony of sound rising around them, and with one collective breath, the villagers surged forward, hearts beating in sync as they faced the specter of what once enslaved their souls. "Together," they cried, their voices harmonizing, transforming fear into solidarity. "We are the truest testament of courage and echo of those we lost." As if ignited by their sheer will, the shadows twisted and writhed, reluctantly parting as the villagers advanced. With each step, they reclaimed bits of themselves, pieces once thought, silenced, and lost. They would not combat the darkness. Instead, they would transform it, taking that very sorrow and weaving into the fabric of their futura, legacy built not on past transgressions, but on the spirit of hope. The earth rumbled, and as they climbed closer to the maw of darkness, it disintegrated on shift of power, transforming sorrow into light, catastrophizing the void finally. The waters roared, thrashing again, but it was no longer a beast to be feared, nor a source of punishment. It became a memory buried in the heart of the village, entwined within their sense of self. Victory came not through bloodshed, but through understanding a revelation that would forever forge ahead into a new era. As dawn broke over the horizon, a subtle yet resounding light seeped through the remnants of darkness. In the village of Endway, a new heartbeat emerged, thrumming in harmony with the spirits of those lost. Together, they would etch a new journey, one of hope that would forever reverberate through the land. Join us as we explore more tales of unity and resilience. Subscribe to Medieval Stories and journey with us through the shadows of history, finding light in even the darkest of places. As the remnants of the storm receded and the first light of dawn broke over Endway, a profound change enveloped the village. The air, once thick with tension and dread, now shimmered with possibilities they had yet to imagine. The villagers gathered at the edge of the once active well, now calmed, a dormant force awaiting their next move. The ground, though scarred and cracked, pulsed with a new rhythm, a heartbeat echoing a promise of renewal. "Do you feel that?" Agnes whispered, standing side by side with her sister. "It's as if the land itself acknowledges our choice." Her sister nodded, eyes wide with wonder. "We've turned something vile into a part of us, claimed our lives back from the shadows." They moved as one unit, slowly approaching the well. The water within was still, reflecting the shimmering light of dawn like a molten mirror. The villagers peered over the edge, curious and cautious, bracing for whatever revelations might still await them. "Maybe it was never about the water itself," the sheriff spoke, finally breaking the weight of silence that had settled over them. "Maybe it was always us. We fed the well our fear, our sins, and now we reclaim it with our courage, our resolve." He stepped forward, a sense of authority restored, and placed a steady hand upon the rim of the well, feeling the cool dampness beneath his palm. "We've transformed this place from a vessel of hunger to one of healing. Let us share what we've learned." As he spoke, the villagers murmured among themselves. A spark of hope flickered here and there, nurtured by the notion that they had the power to alter their fate. Deep down, they understood that while the shadows may linger, so too did their strength. Waves of renewed purpose washed over them like the gentle caress of the morning sun. The well stood before them as a juxtaposition of beauty and terror, signifying the duality of existence. They would no longer ignore the past. Instead, they would fully embrace it, forging new paths in the land of their ancestors. "Let's plant something," Agnes suggested, her heart swelling with newfound determination. "Let's make this well a source of life, a symbol of our rebirth." "Right here?" her sister asked, glancing at the well. "Yes," Agnes affirmed. "Feed it with our roots, not our fear." With that simple yet revolutionary thought, the villagers set to work. They gathered seeds, wildflowers, herbs and vegetables, anything that thrived in the soil of their home. As they descended into the well, each handful of earth they reclaimed held a narrative of their struggle, of loss exchanged for understanding. They would choose to honor the lives taken by planting something that bore fruit and color. "From the ashes of despair, life will grow stronger," the sheriff said, encouraging the villagers to embrace the spirit that bound them. Beneath the weight of the morning sun, laughter returned to the village, the sound rising buoyantly against the backdrop of the new dawn. The seeds they planted mirrored their collective hope, blooming, flourishing, entwined in the threads of community and resilience. As days turned into weeks, the village steadily transformed. The well, once a source of dread, blossomed into a picturesque garden. Flowers colored the landscape, their petals vibrant against the backdrop of the sun-kissed earth. They watered each other's hopes, thriving amidst the echoes of history, forever tied. But the shadows did not vanish entirely. They remained intertwined in the roots, reminders of the past, a collective scar carved upon their souls. They learned that light and darkness could coexist. One evening, after a long day of toil and growth, the villagers gathered at the garden's edge. They brought lanterns, food, and stories, choosing to celebrate their triumphs and acknowledge their scars. They learned to speak openly, confronting the hurt with love and affirmation. Agnes stood at the center, her sister by her side, looking out over the people bound together by shared history. "This, what we have built, is more than just a garden," she began, her voice unwavering. "It's a testament to our strength and our ability to create from the pain that binds us." The villagers nodded, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. "We choose to remember our past, not as captives, but as pioneers finding a renewed path toward a shared tomorrow," Agnes continued. Laughter erupted, and stories flowed freely among them. It was not just a celebration of survival, but of community, of carrying each other's burdens, and of the lessons etched in their flesh. Then a hush fell over them as the sheriff began to speak once more. "Mature trees cast long shadows, yet shadows help to foster new growth as we navigate our lives. Let us never forget where we came from, nor the power that resides in our unity." His words resonated within the hearts of the villagers, solidifying the bond they had forged. Days turned into seasons marked by laughter, labor, and lessons learned under the gentle glow of distant stars. They honored the past by sharing the stories of those they had lost with the next generation, weaving history into the fabric of their lives. The well became a gathering place, new hub of harmony where children played, and families came together to cultivate not just crops but connections. When new souls joined their community, they learned of the well's history tales shaped into hope, sacrifice rendered into strength. As years passed, the scars faded but never disappeared. The garden flourished, a living testament to the resilience that had sprung from darkness, deep roots entwined with history, a cycle of life and death illuminated with determination. And though the shadows may always whisper, as remnants of the past do, the villagers discovered that in the light of unity, those whispers became mere echoes, an integral part of their narrative, a narrative composed of lives lost, eternally intertwined with those who lived. As the sun sank low on the horizon, casting hues of orange and pink across the canvas of the night, they gathered once more around the well, the heart of their beloved village. "Let us continue to share and grow," Agnes urged, her voice steady and clear. "For every one of our stories and the seeds we plant reminds us that from death springs life, and within life resides the beautiful possibility of hope." Together, they pledged to passing the stories down, to nurture love and resilience for generations to come. The garden would thrive, a place where every soul could find solace and strength that transcended even the darkest of times. "Here's to our journey." The sheriff raised his lantern, illuminating their faces, each adorned with newfound hope and pride. "Here's to the light that guides you even through the storms." The villagers joined, voices rising in a chorus that echoed the walls of their past and cradled the promise of their future. "We are the storytellers. We are the keepers of light." As the night deepened and the stars emerged shining bright above, one thing became abundantly clear. Their legacy was no longer a haunting story, but rather one of triumph, healing, and relentless hope. Join us on this journey of resilience, light, and legacy. Subscribe to Medieval Stories, where every tale spins the fabric of history, cradling the echoes that connect us to the present day.